Hello and welcome back to Gapey's Garden. Today we're going to be planting our onion seeds, but before we get to that, I wanted to talk a little bit about the varieties of onions that are available and which ones you should grow. So onions are categorized into three different types. There's the long day, intermediate day, and short day. So not all varieties will grow well in your area, so you need to make sure you get the right type of seed for your area. So I'm here in Washington, and long day onions grow best here, and I could also get away with growing intermediate day onions. So those are the ones that I chose to grow this year. So Ailsa Craig is a really great long day onion, so if you're in the northern part of the US or middle, I think you can grow the Ailsa Craig, and it's a really large onion that I've been growing for several years, and it does really great here. And then I like to try new varieties every year, so I'm giving Globo onion a try. This is one I haven't grown before, but I got both of these from Baker Creek. But Globo onion is an intermediate day onion, and that one grows best in pretty much any part of the country. I think maybe not Florida or Southern California, maybe not. But there's a map that you can go to online to see which type of onion grows best in your area. So both of these are pretty large onions. So we'll see how these do this year. I'm also going to be planting some celery, pink celery, that I got from a seed swap. And I usually start the celery and the onions in January. That's really the best time to start these from seed if you want large bulbs. If you start them much later, you're not going to get very big bulbs. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing that we need to do is get our seed starting mix ready. And my favorite seed starting mix is Jiffy. It's an organic Jiffy seed starting mix, and there's no compost or anything in here, so it's not gonna give us any bugs or anything. It's a very dry mix, so we need to moisten it before we put it in our pot. So I just like to put it in a container like this little bucket here, and then that might be a little too much. Let's take some of this out. And then I've got a bottle of water here. And I like to use warm water, but really it doesn't really matter when you're starting with seeds, because we're going to put this on a heat mat, and that will warm up the potting mix. So we're just going to pour some water in here, and we just want to use a little bit at a time because we don't want to get it too wet. And I've got this little fork. You can use your hand if you want, but I'm just going to mix this in to distribute the water evenly throughout the mix. And then we'll see if we need to add more. You can tell when it's wet enough when you grab a handful and squeeze it. You shouldn't have any moisture fall out, and it should form a ball that stays together in your hand. So that is perfect. So we're going to go ahead and go with that. And what I like to do for onions is use these taller 4-inch pots. These are the square pots. I prefer square pots to the circle ones because they take up less space and you're not wasting any room. So we're going to go ahead and fill this up. I'm going to fill it up about halfway, and then I'm going to add a little bit of fertilizer into the bottom of the cup, because seed starting mix doesn't really have any nutrients in it, and the onions are going to be staying in this pot for quite a while, so they're going to need some fertilizer to get big. And we're going to use some liquid fertilizer later on as well. So I'm just going to pour a little bit of, maybe a teaspoon or so of fertilizer. And I'm using Trifecta from M.I. Gardner. This is one of my favorite fertilizers. It's a 5-10-4 NPK. And then I'm just going to mix that fertilizer into the bottom. And then once the roots get down to the bottom of the pot, they'll have some nutrients to make them happy. So then I'm just going to fill up the rest of this with the seed starting mix. So they don't need any nutrients to get started. That's why I'm only putting it in the bottom of the container. Okay, so I'm going to leave a little bit of room on top so that I can cover the seedlings cover the seeds after I put them in here. So there's about, let me put a little bit more. And I'm just patting it down lightly after I put this in. We don't want to push it down too hard. So that's pretty good. So I've got about 1/2 inch of space on the top. And then I put a lot of seeds in here. So these are brand new seeds from 2020, so they should germinate pretty well. Onions are best if you use them within the first couple of years. So I have some older seed that I decided to toss because it was about 5 years old and I don't think it's going to germinate very well. So I'm going to go ahead, and they send you quite a few seeds. We're not going to be using all these, so I'll either trade some seeds or I'll use them next year. So I usually plant about 64. So I'll plant 8 rows of 8 in this container, or something similar to that. It's not going to be exact, but we'll try and get it close. So you could just sprinkle it around the top, and sometimes I do that if I don't want to spend the time trying to get the exact right number of seeds in here. But just for this exercise, I think I'll go ahead and try and get 64 in here. They're kind of hard to see on this dark soil, but we've got, and the rows don't have to be perfect, but we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's 1 row of 8, and we're just going to do that all the way across 7 more times. So I usually like to go down 1 row, and then I'll go across the top. So we've got 8 across the top and 8 across this way, and then we'll just fill in the rest. So we have, give or take, 64 seeds in there. Sometimes a few get away from you, and there might be a few more than that, but we should be pretty good. Okay, so now we're going to top dress that with some more of the seed starting mix, about 1/2 inch or so, and just kind of lightly tap it down until all of them are covered up. Then what I like to do is just give the top part a few sprays with water, just to keep that top nice and moist where the seeds are at. It should be good. And then, we got to put our label in there. So these are the Ailsa Craig seeds. And then we're going to top that with some saran wrap just to keep the moisture inside so it doesn't dry out. And then we're going to move this over to our heat mat. I've got this heat mat here set to 68 degrees that I'm using to germinate some pepper seeds. So I'm going to go ahead and put my onions on the same heat mat over here. And I've got this light on. Onions, most vegetables, including onions, don't need light to germinate. So I usually cover them with a towel or a blanket, or what I'm using here is a pillowcase. So this just helps to keep the warmth in for our seeds. And I'm going to be checking on these every couple days. It should probably take about 7, I'm guessing maybe around 7 days to germinate, but we're going to start checking them probably on day 5 just to be sure. And as soon as we see them start germinating, I'm going to take this off and I'm going to lower the light a little bit. And we're going to do pretty much the same process with the celery. Now for the celery, I'm going to be using a shorter pot. So this is a 4-inch square pot, but it's not as tall as the ones that we have the onions in, because I'm not going to be keeping the celery in this container for as long as the onions are going to be in there. So I'm not going to use any fertilizer for the celery. When I get them transplanted into different containers, then I'll add some fertilizer. But to start with, it's pretty much the same process. I'm just tapping down the seed starting mix a little bit. Now the celery seeds are actually smaller than the onion seeds, so I'm not even going to bother counting these because they're so tiny. I'm just going to sprinkle these on top of the seed starting mix. I don't need a lot of celery plants, but I'll probably sell some of them. So I'm probably only going to use about half of this bag, and that's a lot of seeds. And I'm not sure how old these seeds are since I got them from a seed swap. Hopefully they're not too old, because celery seeds are another one that don't really last very long. So I'm just gonna sprinkle these on top of, that's actually really a lot. That's probably, I don't know, that's probably 50 seeds right there. Well, we'll just go ahead and finish it off. Just kind of make sure they're just kind of evenly spread apart. And then since they're smaller, they don't need to be covered as much as the onions. So I'm just going to lightly cover these, maybe even 1/4 of an inch, if not less, and just kind of tap that down a little bit. And again, we're just going to spray the top like we did the onions. And we've got a label that we're going to put in there for this one too, so we know what it is, and cover it with the saran wrap like we did the onions. So pretty much the same process, and I think these take about the same amount of time to germinate too. So we're going to go ahead and put these with the onions. All right, we're going to put these we'll put them right in front of the onions and cover them up. And we'll check on them again in a couple days to make sure they don't dry out, but they should stay nice and moist in there with the saran wrap covering it. It's only been 3 days and already we've got some little sprouts coming up. I was really surprised to see some coming up this quickly. Last year it took about 7 days, but they were also older seeds. Since these are newer seeds, they probably took much less time. Nothing yet on the celery, but we'll check them again tomorrow and see what we have. I've gone ahead and taken the saran wrap off of the onions, and I've got them under the lights. It's been exactly 1 week since we got these onions started, and look at how much it's grown in just that 1 week. We're looking like we have a pretty good germination rate on both of these varieties. You can see the seed starting mix on the left one is a lot drier than the one on the right. So I might give it a little bit of water, but the one on the right should be fine for a while. Usually I tell if it needs water by lifting it, and if it feels really light, then I'll give it some water. And I prefer to do bottom watering rather than above watering, because if you water from above, it could encourage fungus gnats as well as mold. So I like to water from the bottom by actually I have some peppers sitting here in some water right now. So that's what I like to do for watering when they're young, is just put the container into that's actually a salad bowl container that I repurposed, and just let it soak up some water and then put it back under the lights when it's done. Usually I do it for a couple minutes, and it should be just enough water. And let's take a look at the celery. So I did check on it this morning, and we did have a little bit coming up, but not much yet. So let's see. Let's bring this out here. So we can see we've got a few seedlings coming up here in the middle. So there should be a lot more coming up here pretty soon. So celery seems to take a little bit longer to germinate than the onions did, but it's looking pretty good. Hey guys, it's been 9 days now since we started the onions and the celery seeds, and we're looking really, really well. Lots of germination on both, and the onions are growing super fast. You can see how tall they are already. A lot of them have their little seeds stuck to the tops, which is totally fine. We're going to give those a trim here in probably another week or so, once they get to about 4 to 5 inches. And they'll just keep growing and growing, and I just keep cutting and cutting until it's time to put them outside. And I'll probably wait till April to get these in the ground. And here's what they'll look like by April. So this is how they look when I get them in the ground. You can see them all in one container, the original container that I started the seeds in. And they're packed in there pretty good, but they're really pretty easy to pull apart. So the roots don't get tangled up too badly, and they're actually pretty strong, surprisingly. And then the celery, I don't keep those in the original container as I mentioned before, so I'm going to be repotting those probably in a few weeks once they get a little bit bigger. But I'm going to go ahead and get this video posted so that you can see the process and have time to get your onions started, because it's really a good idea to get them started in January or early February if you'll be starting them from seed. So one more thing I wanted to mention is the lighting that I'm using here. This is actually a shop light that I got from, I think, Lowe's. But you can use either the T8 fluorescent bulbs, which is what I've used in the past, but this year I'm trying the LED tubes. They'll fit into the same light structure as the T8 bulbs. And I've got them on a timer set to on for 16 hours. So they do get a little bit of a break in the evening and are just on for 16 hours. And I keep the light pretty close to the seedlings. So I usually try to keep them about an inch or two. So I've got this little pulley system here that I use to easily get the light to go up and down. So I just flip this little switch and that causes the light to go down. And I've got some peppers here on the other side, and so I also need to lower that. All right, so I can see here, so that's too close. You don't want them touching the onions. So we want to keep about an inch or two away from the seedlings, so that should be just perfect. And they're going to grow super fast, so you want to keep an eye on that to make sure they don't touch the light, and just keep raising it and also cutting those seedlings back so they don't get too tall. And you just keep doing that and keeping them watered using the bottom watering method, and keep them going until April, where you can put them out in the ground. So thanks for watching, and I hope you try giving growing onions a try, and we'll talk to you again soon. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. You can also find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.